All right, 1 second here. All right, we're going holding by Pirke Avos ethics of our fathers. Again, what do I want? Holding by Pirke Avos ethics of our fathers. We are in second chapter, Mishna 16. Again, one holding by Pirke Avos ethics of our fathers. We are in chapter 2, Mishnah 16. And the Mishnah says, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, the Mishnah says, an evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. So we've been speaking for the last number of weeks in the name of Rabbeinu Yonah. And Rabbeinu Yonah says, right, Rabbeinu Yonah here says that, what do I have over here? I have a person not happy with what they have, right? Not happy with what they have. They're jealous of their friends, right? Causes all kinds of problems. They wish what they had, what their friends have, they wish they had, why they have a better spouse, better kids. As experts of nature would say, the person who desires all that their friend has contaminates the person's thoughts. Yeah, they'll constantly think about these things, they'll be jealous, and this will cause the evil eye. Now, essentially, they're jealous and they want things they don't have or they can't have. And again, it's going to make a person depressed. They won't be able to function, and it will eventually, taking them out of this world, literally. And the person is obviously not looking at the good. They're obviously looking at the bad, and they're seeing what I don't have, what I should have, what I deserve, right? And the other person has it, and therefore, whatever reason you can't get it, and that's going to cause all kinds of problems. So we've spoken a few different angles on this. I mean, a lot of it has to do with being jealous, not being happy with what you have. It's a lack of emunah, it's a lack of faith and belief in God, right? As we mentioned a number of times, why should a person in general care, what someone else has? Why are they looking what other people have? Because it doesn't really matter. Whatever God gives a person, that's what we get. Right now, you think we deserve more, we should have more. I'm working hard, I'm striving, I'm doing all kinds of things. Why is it I don't have what I need? Or what, let's say better, what I want. Why not? I deserve it. I work hard. I do other things. Why should that not be the case? Why should I be lacking? Why should I be lacking in any way? Right? So that's the way some people are for sure going to look at it. And they'll be jealous. They'll be jealous of what other people have, and they won't be satisfied with what they have, right? The Mishna Pirke Avos says later, as we're going to see, Mihu Ashir, who's considered rich, and that is Mishu Sameach B'Chelkoi. Means they are happy what they have, right? So today people complain, I don't have this, I don't have that, this should happen, that should happen. They complain about what they don't have. They don't think about they don't think about the good. So that we've spoken about before. But I will mention one of the former heads of Maribis base in Eida Charedis in Jerusalem, Rabengis of blessed memories, one of the Torah giants, whatever, the last generation. No question No question about it. And one of the things he said was, among other things, was where do you find the person that hates money? Right? The Gemara says, person should hate money, should despise, should despise money. So my Rebbe would say, money's not everything, right? Certainly not everything, but it's always good to have some in your pocket. Okay. Now Rabbein has asked the question, and again, this is really the main part of the issue. A person may be jealous of what someone has. So we're talking about materially, right? We're not just, if a person's jealous, let's say, of their spiritual success and how much Torah they learn, how much students they have, this, that, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That motivates the person, right? That will motivate a person more than they'll speak bad against them, they'll have things against them. That'll motivate a person because we call that kina sofrim, right? Jealousy describes, literally, right? Means the person's jealous. A person, there can be jealousy even among rabbinic authorities, right? But it's not the same type of jealousy here, right? That type of jealousy we're not looking at as a bad thing, right? Why not? Because that type of jealousy, person would like to strive to be like someone else, would like to be as great, let's say, as someone else. That will motivate them spiritually to become better, right? Now, a person may ask why. If a person, let's say, is jealous, of someone else, of their spiritual status, right? Let's say, and what they have in that sense, and how hard they themselves work, and how much they have learned, and and all that. So why wouldn't a person want to, badmouth them, right? It would make sense in a certain way. Say, I'm also successful. I love what to give over, right? Why should you only listen to him? You should listen to me. I also have thousands of subscribers. Okay, I don't have tens of thousands. I don't have hundreds of thousands, but what do they have to offer? I don't. Right? The person can say that someone like that, jealousy can also destroy them, in certain ways. Because then they'll nitpick at things that they say, or things that they don't say, or why don't they do this? Or why don't, why don't they do that? Or whatever the case is. Yeah, but in general, we say in spiritual terms, that type of jealousy is not bad. Why is it not bad? Because the person will want to strive to be like that person, right? They have what that person is, let's say, in general terms. So that type of thing is not bad because, their heart's in the right direction. If it leads them to speak badly against others, okay. Obviously, people that are greater than us in spiritual terms, that's going to be bad. That will not turn out well, right? That for sure, will not turn out well. A person, this person's always stringent, a person's always this, why they come out and say this and they don't do that. And, like my Rebbe would say, if a person's a rabbi of a synagogue and they're not trying to run him out of town, he's not doing his job right? Now, what does that mean? It means, a person, sometimes has to speak very strong and has to speak what people need to hear, not what they want to hear, right? It's a very big difference. People want, there are people out there, they want make-believe, they want fluff, they want things that, they want to quote, Moreno Rabbeinu Agona Tzaddik Dennis the Menace, right? They want to quote Dennis the Menace, or, The Far Side, or The Wizard of Id, or Calvin and Hobbes back in my day. Yeah, Doonesbury, even. Yeah, but no substance. No substance to what they say. I'm not saying you can't necessarily bring it out, maybe as a parable, but there's no substance. No substance to what they say. Now, that's what people want. They want to feel good. They don't want to feel, they don't want to feel like, they're not doing the right thing. They're not doing what they want, or, they don't want to be limited. They don't want to be limited so much. So they want to hear good things. But, a rabbi's job is not necessarily to always tell the good, right? You got to tell it, kind of the way it is. And some people for sure don't want to hear that. They'd rather hear fluff. I had somebody once tell me, I think I mentioned the story before, someone said, when I go to synagogue, the rabbi gets up to speak, I am there and I'm paying dues. And whatever I'm paying to be entertained. That's what I said. They have to, one of the things they have to train, right? These rabbis, obviously, it's not about knowledge. What do they have to train? Fact. They have to train, obviously, not to give a sermon, right? How to give over information, in the right way. Okay. They're not saying give over the right information. They're just saying, teaching them, in, how to speak, how to give over, how to get the message across, so to speak. How to write a sermon. That's what they're being taught. Right? Very good. So again, may have fluff, may have nothing to it, but it's entertaining. Okay. I would think, going to synagogue and hearing something from a rabbi would be more than entertaining. Right? It would actually be inspiring. It would actually get them want to keep more mitzvahs, do more things. Okay, maybe you gotta get mussar, maybe you gotta speak to what they need to hear, character development, other things, okay. We're in the 9 days, just started we just went through Rosh Chodesh, so we just finished Rosh Chodesh here, right? The new month, to get the 9 days, so during the week in general, it's very strong morning customs, right? We're not eating meat or drinking wine, right? Except on Shabbos, we don't take, we don't bathe for pleasure, and during this time, especially not getting haircuts and listening to music and and all that. We don't do laundry, a lot of things, right? So it's very intense now. The time period's very, very intense, and it's all about one major thing. And the one major theme is destruction of the temple. That is, the major theme that we're still going through because, we haven't rebuilt it. The temple was destroyed because of what we call sinas chinam, what we call unlawful, unlawful hatred, right? So at the end of the day, it still exists. Speaking Lashon Hara badly against others still exists, right? These things still exist. That's why a temple hasn't been rebuilt. So it's a time not to feel good, right? It's we don't go swimming now, right? Swimming, unless the person had to do it really for exercise, swimming, it can be dangerous now. Any, travel in general. Obviously, the person has to work, going back and forth to work. It's one thing. A person had to travel for business, right? Certainly better if they can push it off. Push it off a week, right? It's just a horrific week, and it's been a horrific week throughout, the generations, throughout the millennium, for the Jewish people. So these are days. This week, we're not taking, sorry, I'll say better. We're taking extra precaution, right? So again, whether we have to ask their, local Orthodox rabbi whether they should travel, during the 9 days, right? I mean, obviously on an airplane. I'm talking about in a car, right? So, these type of things, we have to have, the mentality. We should have this mentality, right? During the last 2 weeks, is that it's not a happy time. It's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a happy time. Again, we're not necessarily allowed to be depressed either, but you got to take in stock, each time period has its specific, specific theme, right? So after Fast and Night of Love, which is next Saturday night, Sunday, after that, you got 2.5 weeks. And after those 2.5 weeks, you got the month of Elul. Month of Elul, all about introspection, right? Preparation for Rosh Hashanah. Then you get Rosh Hashanah, Day of Judgment, right? It's an intense time. That whole month, Rosh Hashanah, 10 days of repentance. You come to Yom Kippur, right? Very, very intense time, 40 days, right? 40 days. So, you got Hanukkah's time of great joy. You got Passover's time of redemption, right? So you got different times during the year have specifically, different themes. Now, sometimes we could feel like we're walking on air, let's say during Sukkot. It's supposed to be a time of great joy. Again, during the month of Nisan and Passover time, a great, great redemption. And there are other times. Other times you got fast days, you got mourning periods, right? You got the, 33 days between Passover and Shavuos when 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died. Right, also an intense, kind of intense mourning period, but this is even more intense. Right, you have similar mourning customs, except when you hit the 9 days. Once you hit the 9 days, then we're certainly not, bathing for pleasure. We're certainly not, we're not washing clothes. Right, again, these are mourning customs. The person may not be so in tune, right, with these, but when a person's in mourning, these are things you do. Right, these are things according to Judaism, especially for Jews. Right, that is what we do. So it's intense. Right, there's no, there's no question. But you got to feel the pain. Right, you got to feel, what we're going through, and we see all the time. And it gets worse and worse. Seemingly getting worse. Anti-Semitism at an all-time high. Right, at an all-time high, and this is really what's supposed to be. This is what really supposed to be before before the Messiah comes. And the test over here is what is Emunah, right? The test is belief and faith in God. That is the test of this, of this generation. We see that obviously you look in history. History has there have been high points, for the Jewish people. I don't think there's any question. There've been, certain high points, and there've been down points, where Jewish people, have been tossed around. If you look at Jewish history, you start with Joshua, we go through the prophets, like a sine curve, right? I remember back in the day, a sine curve goes, it's a wavy curve, right? When the Jews do the right thing, they go all the way up. When they do the wrong thing, they go all the way down, right? There's nothing in between. Nothing in between. So either the Jewish people are doing the right thing and everything's good, or they're not, and there's payback, and there could be serious, right? There could be serious payback. But in general, obviously, we want to feel good. We want to feel good about ourselves. Person focuses on the negative. It's all about doom and gloom. Okay, but a person has to understand. They have to understand the situation. Someone took me to task, is taking me to task, that I should be more vigilant speaking against anti-Semitism. Could be, right? Definitely could be. But you have people out there, any anti-Semitic thing, they're gonna, they're gonna put on their feet, and they're gonna call people out, and all these things. Okay, I don't know, I have a problem with it. Trying to keep my things very simple, just just over. But you have to come out against it. That's for sure, right? And there's a platform, the platform to do it. But one of the things I make clear is the fact that what's the point? What's the point of anti-Semitism? Let's start from the beginning, right? You go from the beginning of time. You have Esav, son as Yaakov, right? Esav hates Jacob. You can say, of course he hates Jacob. Why? Because Jacob stole the blessing. Okay, right? Understand that his mother, a prophecy, his mother tells him to steal the blessing, take the blessing. And Yitzhak agreed after he saw, and Esav says he got swindled. The second time he got swindled, he understood. He understood. He gave the blessing to the right person. Okay. The whole question, how could you think, that Esav should have got the blessing? But you're going to say, of course he's going to hate him, right? Look what he did. Look what he did. So, anti-Semitism, let's say, stems from that. It'll never end. It'll never end until the Messiah comes. Now, I heard someone once say, if more people become Noahites, it'll disappear. It won't disappear. It's not supposed to disappear. It'll disappear, right, after the Messiah comes. Now, the fact is that, it's in the air. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not. We get blamed for everything. It's totally not rational, right, as we mentioned many times. Totally not rational. The reason is Because some will say, it's our fault. It's totally our fault. Because we have too much money. So in countries where Jewish people have a lot of power and a lot of money, as they say, they hate Jews because of that. Okay. Now, if it's because of money, and Jews are in a country, let's say they don't have money, they don't have power, right? They're poor. So then they'll hate them. Why? Because they're sponging off of, the government, taking too many government funds, and they're sponges to to society. They're not doing what they need to do. So you have contradictory reasons here. So anytime you have a contradictory reason, that cannot be the ultimate reason. So you can have also Jewish anti-Semites saying the same thing. But when it comes to this, it's a mind-boggling thing. When it comes to it's not rational. Like all these things, when you break it down, it's very simple. I mean, you don't have to be you certainly don't have to be a Rhodes Scholar, by any stretch to see it. But but there are things people say they want to make Jews, Israel, let's say, look bad, make no sense. No other country or quote unquote nation, right, or whatever you want to call it, any ethnic group would ever get accused of half the things, Israel gets accused of. Not only that, now that we care about the UN is, has condemned Israel, more than any other nation, combined, and Israel's only, at least back in the day, was 1/1000th of the world's, population. So, when you look at these arguments and what people ultimately, are going to say, there are people calling it out. Very good. There are people pointing out what they're doing in Gaza cannot be genocide, right? If you look at, the Arabs from 48 to 67 and further, they've only expanded exponentially. Right? In other words, they've only gone up in population. For doing genocide, doing a pretty bad job. And then people say, look at how many people they're killing. Look how many innocent people they're killing. Okay. So, a whole bunch of generals in England and, in America certainly come out against that. So it's not true. They're doing the best that any other nation, whatever, has ever tried to do, in a war. And then people say, we're starving them. We're absolutely starving them, and 200 million tons of food have gone on there, have gone through there, from the Israelis themselves. So, if they're not getting the food, then obviously Hamas is to blame. Why does anybody care? And not only that, take it one step further, just how absurd it is. They are supporting an enemy. They're sending food to an enemy. Where'd you ever have that? Germany never had that. Other countries never had that. Americans are going to supply food to their enemy? Anyone ever called on that? Never. Right? It's ludicrous. All these claims. All these claims are ludicrous. And even if, according to them, even though the number's totally skewed, right? Which I'm not going to get into politics here, right? But even though the numbers are totally skewed, let's call a spade a spade. They're hiding behind human shields. Why does nobody care about that? That's my biggest question. This whole thing with this Gaza war, that's my biggest question. Yeah, nobody cares. It's mind-boggling, right? It's mind-boggling. But I would say with all these things, and the media slaughtering, no pun intended, right? Slaughtering the Jewish people. Yeah, right? So obviously you got influencers out there, influencers out there that what? Should be calling them out on it. Okay, there are plenty of people out. There are people calling them out. Now, there are things that happen every day. All over the world. Doesn't matter where it is. Things are happening against Jews on a daily basis. You can speak about it forever. Right? Every class I do, Q&A. This class, Ethics for Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus, could tie it in also. Okay. I think of that ad nauseum. I mean, still exists. It's still going to exist. It's not going to change. But what's the point? What's the point? So the old adage, if Jews don't make Kiddush, non-Jews make Havdalah. Right? Havdalah, the last service on Shabbos differentiates, that's what it means, differentiates between every day and the holy, right? The holy and every day. So if we don't do what we're supposed to do, right? And that's really the point. The nations will remind us. That's what anti-Semitism is for. Yeah, part of what it's for sure. It's to remind the Jewish people you're not doing your job. You got to do your job better. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's extremely intense. Yeah, I don't see it getting any better before the Messiah comes. I don't think it's going to be a drop-off. Right? I don't imagine. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I don't imagine that's going to be the case. So wouldn't it be so easy, right? So I'll answer this person. Wouldn't it be so easy every single day? Put up this post, put up that post, put up another. Yeah, okay. So there are people doing it. I need to do it. It's my obligation to do it. This is what's supposed to be. People don't want to hear that. Very uncomfortable to hear that. This is a major wake-up call for the Jewish people. You're gonna change, you're gonna change their mind. You're gonna change their mind all of a sudden to love Jews. Because now you want to get into dialogue and you want to call them out on it. Okay. Yeah. It's putting, this comes to a whole separate discussion. Does putting stuff up change people's awareness? You say, well, if you don't do anything, their awareness will never be changed. Okay. That I would agree. People have to be made aware. But you know what? As we always say, two people can see the same thing. They see the same thing, come to very different conclusions, right? I'll give an example. I was going to write a book years ago about Jews coming back to Judaism on Bali Tshuva, as they call them. And I spoke to somebody, and I asked them, they became religious later on in life, like in the mid-30s, and all the kids became religious when they were teenagers. So I asked them, okay, let's hear the story. Let's hear what happened. So he tells me that's not the question. He says, you're asking the wrong question. I said, okay, so what's the right question? So the right question, he says, was that's why did me and my siblings see the same thing? And I changed and they didn't. He goes, that's the question you'd be asking. We saw the same things, grew up the same way. It's like someone who understands 39 Scud missiles, sent to Israel. And, during the Gulf War, none of them hit anything, right? So someone says, absolute miracle by God. Someone says, no, it takes off his watch, calculator, says, no, it could be 1 in a billion chance, but it could happen. I said, okay, I'll take all the money I don't have. That'll never happen. I'll put it down and say, never happen. You want to tell me 1 missile hits nothing? Okay. 2 missiles hit nothing. Good. 3 missiles hit nothing. Okay. When you get close to 10, I'm going to get skeptical. They don't hit anything? Nothing? They hit open areas? I mean, either get the stupidest people shoot them or, something else going on, i.e. God's knocking them off. Right? It's 1 or 2 conclusions. You don't have any other, you don't have any other options. Okay. But 2 people see the same thing, they look at it very differently. So, but that's your opinion, and you've been brainwashed, and okay. You have a better explanation. Again, it's hidden within hiddenness. That's what God's presence is. We don't see direct. So not everyone's going to come to the same conclusion, except when the Messiah comes. Then everyone's going to come to the same conclusion. Right now, it's still within hiddenness. So people can say, no, it could happen. There's a chance it could happen. There is a chance that it could happen. You give me all your life savings, right? Whatever your life savings is, you put it in the bank and you sign it over and say, if I'm wrong, right, and this happens, I'll sign it over. You're not going to do that, right? Well, our brother would never do that. It'd be absolutely stupid to do it because what are the odds? You're playing roulette, right? So you say. So you play, let's say red 13. Yeah. Now, what are the chances it hits red 13? It'll hit at some point. 100% it's gonna hit at some point. Maybe 1 in 100, maybe 1 in 1,000, right? Whatever the odds are. But it's gonna hit. 100% is gonna hit at some point. Yeah. You want to tell me that 39, nothing's going to hit? Zero? You want to put all your money down on the table on that? I don't think anyone signed up for that. They'll say it'll hit a building, it'll hit a fire hydrant, it'll hit something, it'll hit a house. Bound to hit something. Can't tell me it's not going to hit anything. We've got major cities. I cannot hit anything. So you're going to put all your money down saying 39, zero? Zero is going to hit? I don't think so. Right? No atheist in a foxhole. I don't think that's going to happen. Could be wrong. I don't think it's going to happen. The odds are too slim. But a person could say, in theory, it could happen. Yeah. It could be 1 in a billion, but it could happen. Okay. Yeah. So two people can see the same thing, and their conclusion is vastly different. Why? Because they see what they want to see. And that's hard to change. So people believe a certain thing. Something drastic is going to have to happen. It's not to be so drastic, but something drastic, I would think in this case, would have to happen to change a person's view. Right? Well, I'll give an example. There was somebody in Parliament ahead of this far-right party in Hungary, right, a number of years ago. Yeah, a rabid anti-Semite, and then his tune changed when he found out it was actually Jewish, had Jewish blood. That's drastic. That how can someone stay or someone be anti-Jewish? They now find themselves have Jewish blood, right? Kind of an oxymoron, right? In many ways. So, okay, that's drastic. So for a lot of these people, no matter how ignorant they are, something radically is going to have to change for them to see the truth. And you can argue with it, but they keep saying the same things, which means they don't want to hear what the truth is. But look how many people are starving in Gaza. Okay. It's all Israel's fault. Yeah, but Israel's giving them tons and tons of food. And Hamas is stealing it. Yeah, and they're starving their own people. Doesn't matter. Israel's to blame. All right, let's bring back the scenario. Let's say it again so it gets through your thick skull. This is what's going on the ground. How can you blame Israel for that? How in the world can they be blamed for that? And if genocide is, systematically the destruction of a whole nother ethnic group, why do you have so many Arabs employed in Israel? Doctors, dentists, other things. If you were going to annihilate them, they wouldn't even be allowed, you'd walk into a house and just kill them all. You wouldn't allow them to work here. You just got them all down. Now you want to say you're talking the least common denominator of people, okay, not all stupid. Not all stupid, but they've all been brainwashed. Okay. So now, showing the information and getting out there. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's definitely not a bad thing. Yeah. But at the end of the day, how many people are going to be convinced? You think most of the known world that are anti-Semite, I'm saying all the people that are anti-Semites, all of a sudden now you're going to convince them? They're also going to say, oh, you know what? We love Jews. Let's have chicken Friday night. Like, that's going to change? What's going to change? I'm not saying they're bad. They should be called out. 100% they should be called out. But at the same time, you're going to call them out every day because it happens all the time. You got Jewish anti-Semites. Just as bad. Just as bad. Saying that, we should be defunded. We should be able to fight our enemies. That's insanity. That is insanity, Look at what Bernie Sanders has to say. Yeah. What do these people have to say? Again, did I say I was not going to get into politics? Yeah. But look at that. It's insanity. There's worse of an anti-Semite than others are. Yeah. Yeah, Kissinger didn't want to, fund, give any ammunition, to Israel during the 6-Day War. Also a Jew, self-hating Jew. Self-hating Jews are worse than non-Jews are anti-Semites. Yeah. Wouldn't it be very easy on a daily basis, call all these people out every second of every day? Kanye West, whatever he calls himself, yeah? Couldn't we call him out every day, the stupid things he says? I don't care if he's bipolar. Yeah? Stupid things that he says, anti-Semitic things. Yeah, people do it. Okay. They're going to change him. Is that essentially going to change anything? I'm not saying we deserve to be walked on. I'm not saying that, right? Okay, what are we going to do that's going to answer them? It's a wake up. The whole point is what I said to this person is it's a wake up call for us. So if we're being, our ethnicity, so to speak, is being trashed all over the place, and there's danger for Jews to be outside, in certain places or dressed a certain way. Yeah, isn't that a wake up call? Isn't that a serious wake up call? So God's just using them. He's using them like a stick, right? As as we always say, person whacks a dog with a stick. Who's the dog go after? The stick. So then God using these people to get to us. That's what he's doing. He wants us to wake up. You won't wake up. You won't repent. This is a serious time period before, the temple's being destroyed. You're not going to wake up, smell the coffee, so to speak. Okay. So I'll put these, I'll put these scumbags out there and I'll put them on top of you. And you'll remember that you're a Jew, even if you're not so religious. They'll remind you. That's what it means to make Havdalah. They will remind you. They will distinguish whether you're religious or not. Doesn't matter. Right? Hit me, Yamashim over Zichra. May they be blotted out, may rot wherever he is. They didn't care. Yeah, Jewish blood from the wrong side. I remember there was a story with Michael Douglas. So his son tells him, he says, Dad, if you're, if Grandpa was Jewish, right? If what's his name? It's Michael Douglas' father, right? Kirk Douglas was Jewish, he married an non-Jew, right? He was a Jew, no doubt about it. So his grandson says, "Wow, Grandpa was Jewish, and you're half Jewish from the wrong side. Obviously, he wasn't Jewish." Michael Douglas, he goes, "That made me a quarter Jewish," and the answer is no, it doesn't make you Jewish at all, right? No difference. But Hitler Yamach Shemoy V'Zichro would not have cared. He would not have cared if you had, half blood, quarter blood, no difference than, the Muslims, you put in Hamas, you put in all, most of the rest of the Arabs in there. Their goal is to kill every single Jew. That's their goal. And they make it very clear. They don't even hide it. They make it very clear. So it doesn't matter what blood you have in you. Yeah, quarter Jewish, half Jewish, it doesn't matter. Right? They're hunting Jews down. That's what they do. That's their goal. Yeah. So you can call out against it. You can, make all these committees and do things. Okay, it's worth something. 100% it's worth something. And people should do it. Okay. But should that be the focus? Should that be the last focus of every last thing? I would say it's important in the sense where if this is happening, and it's happening on a global basis, what's the reason for it? So you say, before the Messiah comes, it's going to be much more intense. Good. It's going to be much more intense. Okay. But even it's going to be much more intense, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is it's a wake-up call for us. That's what it is. Right? It's a wake-up call. Right? 100%. 100% a wake-up call. And as Jewish people don't wake up, guess what happens? Worse. It gets worse. It's only supposed to get worse. It's only supposed to get worse until until the Messiah comes. That's the bottom line. Right? That's the bottom line. So if that's going to get the Jews to repent, very good. Right? If it's going to get the Jews to repent, so it's worth something. Yeah. Now, I can be busy every second of every day just commenting on that with all the things that happen. Okay. But the point is, if you don't, then nobody cares. Good. People have to know about it. Very good. My job every second of every day, it's also my job, some people that, call themselves rabbis and are heretics, every second of every day have to bash them. I don't think so. I mean, you call them out when you need to call them out. I don't have a problem with that. Plenty of people do it. That's fine. And they're misleading people and they're misguided and all that. Very good. But people have to be warned. Okay. But again, does that mean every second of every day I have to do that? Because hey, it depends on the person, depends on the staff, depends what they're talking about. Okay. So a person, will make the call when they make the call. I don't think it has to be harped on all the time. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, yeah. But anyway, back to my original point here. And, without getting too much sidetracked here, the original point was, who hates money? Who out there, as Rabanga said, who hates money? We're busy. We're busy, trying to, catch our tails, trying to stay ahead of the game. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not, right? But if we're talking about living in the Messianic era, and everybody agrees that we're living in the Messianic era, no one disagrees. Yeah. So Messiah's right around the corner. When's he going to come? Nobody knows. But when's he going to come? The fact is, people are busy redoing the bathrooms and doing other things. Redoing their kitchens. Very good if they need a new kitchen. Kitchen's old, you got to rip it out. Okay. But someone just, you could live with it. You want to make an upgrade. Maybe it's not for this generation. What I'm going to say. Well, the Messiah's going to come. The Messiah's coming soon. Whenever that is, why are we getting caught up in all this other stuff? Stuff that doesn't really matter. You say, what? Having a nice kitchen doesn't matter. We're living in this generation. This is the cream puff generation. So person needs a new kitchen. Let's say they do. Okay. Yeah, well, let's say they, essentially really they don't. And it's want it to be nice. Let's say. Technically is there anything wrong with that? So again, where's our mentality here? Everybody knows we're not here forever. Right? Fame, we're not going to be here forever. Everybody knows that. Yeah. But we do things in our lives thinking we're not going to be here forever. Right? Now, even a person, let's say, it's a nice house, they do it the way they want, this, that. How many years, practically speaking, they're gonna live there? 5 years, 10 years. There are people live in the same house for decades. Okay. But in the end, a person acquires wealth, let's say. They acquire a lot of money. Are they gonna be able to use it in their lifetime? Most of the time it's probably not gonna get used. It's probably gonna go to their kids, their spouse, or whatever. Yeah, or imagine they die, spouse remarries, and and that spouse gets it. Gets a good chunk of it. So the previous spouse worked like a dog, made all this money, very good. And it went to someone else. Again, does that mean someone should have money? No. Right? Obviously you have to know how to use it. But what's the point? If someone had the opportunity, they made more money. Let's say if I had more money, I could give more charity. I could help more people. Very good. Right? The only problem is if you have 100, you want 200. If you have 200, you want 400. It never ends. It never ends. So Rabbankus is asking the question, someone who hates money, like, where do you see that? Where do you see anyone who hates money? Because the more you have, the more you want. But again, what's the bigger picture? Bigger picture is I'll use it for the right thing, right? But you got to be focused. I'm not saying you have to live in a hovel. Right? I'm not saying a person shouldn't necessarily have nice things, right? But the mentality is so skewed and it's so backwards that we don't know what the heck we're doing. No idea what we're doing. So to find people that actually hate money, no. They had great people, any money they have, they gave it to others. They themselves lived on a minimum amount. They don't have that. Today, you don't have that. Right? It's very rare. It's very rare if you had that. Right? You find someone that has that. Because they have money, they want more money. They'll help others. I'm not saying they won't help others. Again, it means you can't have a nice house, a nice car. Okay, within reason. But if you were given a nice, nice set of money or whatever, your whole goal is to help others. That's the goal, right? That is, that is the purpose. So if I look at it that way, let's say I look at it that way, and money's not the end all things, right? It's only, so I said my high school statement, money's only a medium of exchange, right? That's what it is. It's always good, but everyone would say it's good to have in your pocket. Okay. Is it the end all things? You need it. Can't do anything without it. Very good. Right? You need to put food on the table, whatever, you're going to pay your bills. Very good. You need it. There's no question. It's all encompassing. Because the more you have, the more you want. Now, there are other people who live day to day, month to month, paycheck to paycheck. Okay. But I'm talking about the ones, the ones that have. And the ones that have, what are they doing? They lost focus, totally lost focus. Yeah. Even if they give, let's say they give to charity. What charity do they give it to? Yeah, let's say they give it to bad charities. Then what did God give them the money for? So it's also a big test. Yeah, it's also a big test, right? So the idea about being jealous of what someone else has, why can't someone say, okay, so God gave them plenty. They want to use it however they want to use it. So long as they don't flaunt it. They flaunt it, they're in trouble because then people are going to be jealous. So once people are jealous, as we mentioned before, God's going to open up their file. Nobody wants their file opened, unless it's Day of Judgment, right? Unless it's Rosh Hashanah. So, okay, if they're doing things for their own needs, got to be very, very careful. But if God gave you, fine. You should use it the right way. If you don't, there'll be payback for that. But in general, and this is a very hard thing, in general, why in the world, we mentioned this before, why in the world should I care what someone else does? What am I lacking over here? Say, oh, they're going fancy vacations, they do this, we're stuck at home. You gotta make it fun for your kids also. But again, can't break the bank. You don't have the bank to break. So you do whatever you can do. But the other thing is, as we've also mentioned, you have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. They they got money, everything looks great, go on vacations and this and that. And the kids like hate the parents. Or one spouse hates the other spouse, or things, not going the way they should. In other ways, money-wise, okay. And sometimes even money-wise, what we see doesn't look like reality. Yeah, because you don't know. Maybe they have, tremendous debts, maybe other things, but they're still living the high life for whatever reason. So you have no idea. So since we have no idea, a person shouldn't comment. But even so, person hears things, sees things, whatever. Why are we looking astray? That's the question. Why are we looking the other way? Why do we care? Because it affects us. Why? That's the question. Why does it affect us? Because you don't see, as Rabbenga said, you don't see people hate money. They want money. They want more money. Someone's told when I was in the States, the difference is, if people in Israel, if they were making more money, let's say, unless you're in high tech, let's say, if you were making more money, if people here would be making more money, then they'd be no different than Americans. No, they'd be no different, like redoing their bathrooms and whatever. Yeah, it'd be no different. I said, I hope that wouldn't be the case. I hope it wouldn't be the case. But it could be true because you don't live by that ideal. Then you get caught up with everything else and whatever else is going around us, and that is seeped into the Jewish community. People trying to hold to a certain standard because other people do it. Other people have upped the ante, as we would say. It doesn't help them. It forces them into a lifestyle that they can't do. There's no possible way for them to do, but they'll try and do it because they want to keep up with everyone else. They want to have the facade of being like everybody else, but they're not. 100% they're not. But they get caught up in it. Right? So, if someone was struggling, all of a sudden, business starts to boom and things start to change, see how they live their lives. Their lives are very different. They'll do things they wouldn't have normally done. Well, why wouldn't have done it? Why in the world wouldn't they have done it? Because they have money. Okay. But now they have money. It's different, it's a different story. So in this sense, having it changes the person. It 100% changes the person. And find people that don't want it and are not interested in it and whatever, it's very rare. So money controls. It definitely controls the person. Controls the way they look at things, how they hold themselves up. People that are poor and have difficulty and struggle, they don't walk with extra oomph in their step. Yeah, because they feel like, this person's gonna come for them, someone else is gonna come for them, gonna pay this, gonna pay that, and where money's coming from. So like they're hunched over. Not literally. But they have to deal with constant pressure. Now, if you had more money, you wouldn't have to deal with that pressure. You deal with other things. But when you see somebody doesn't want that, somebody doesn't strive for that. How many people only strive that they should have the bills paid for and that's it? How many people pray for that? I take a survey. I think a survey. But I guarantee some people are not paying for that. They're praying, yeah, let me make it big. Let me help others. Give me the opportunity. Someone asked the rabbi, if I work more hours, I work overtime, this and that, so that'll allow me to give more charity. Yeah, I should work to the bone to be able to give more charity. He said, is that a good thing? He said, no. You do what you can do. You give as much as you can. Who says you have to work more to give more? And maybe you lose out otherwise, in other ways. Maybe your washing machine will go, your fridge will go, something happened with your car. I don't know. A lot of things could happen. They weren't supposed to make that money anyway. So, whatever money you try and grab from this world, it could be taken away in other ways. Medical bills, right? Let's say. Could be a million things. Could be a million things. But at the end of the day, who's living their life like that? Right? And if you're not living your life like that at some level, then you're controlled by it. In a lot of ways, we're controlled by it. And that is not a good thing. It's not a good thing by any stretch. And the reason is very simple, because once it controls us, then, let's say you get an opportunity to get it, and now you have it. Now you're in a different, spot, a much better spot. Are you going to be any different now than you were before? So I know some people that say they came into money. I mean, serious money didn't change them. They weren't affected by it. That's very rare. But there are people like that. There are people that came into money, weren't affected by it. But that's what money does to people. Makes them think they can do this, they can do that, they can do the other thing. They can walk on air because they have money. Who cares? E.F. Hutton, right? They speak, E.F. Hutton, right? This person has what to say. Well, I don't care what they have to say. I really care what they have to say. You got a famous basketball player, they quote him saying the world is flat. I'm like, did you ever read Encyclopedia Britannica on the subject? You idiot. Right? You still believe the world is flat. But he gets a byline, people will quote him in magazines and other things. Why? Because he got money. If you don't have money, you think, anyone's going to quote him for any reason? I think he's a crackpot. She is anyway, probably. Yeah, it's a crackpot. I don't care what he has to say. You got, what do you call it? You got, directors and actors and this and that. Got plenty of money. Fortunately, some of them being Jewish, they give their spin on what Judaism is. Like, who cares what they have to say? Like, well, I think this. I'm like, can you, here's a prayer book. Can you read it for me? Can you tell me what it says without looking at the English translation? Just like start to read it. And explain it to me in terms. What's going on without looking at any translation. Until you're able to do that, like don't give me your Webster's 8th definition what you think Judaism is. Nobody cares. We don't care. Makes news, right? Who cares what you have to say? Right? So in general, this shouldn't matter. But what money gives people egos. Egos. To find Rabbangus is right. To find someone, really hates money, really despises money. Right? You won't find that. It's very rare. Very rare. But what's the point? What's the point? Money comes in, whatever it is. So you have to know how to use it. And you have to know how to use it the right way. And if you don't use it the right way, it controls you. I made my money, let someone else make their money. But what do people want today? More than anything, I just read an article earlier about this, that, you have a lot of people coming out, let's say, after learning, for so many years, come out in business. What do they want to do? Make it big. That's all they want to do. They want to make it big. Yeah. They want to make it big. And I'm not even saying without working hard. Say if they want to work hard, okay. That's their goal. That's their goal. But, you got to do it the right way. You got to put in the effort. You got to put in the time. There are no shortcuts. Take shortcuts. Right? This is one of the main ideas. You take shortcuts the wrong way, you'll pay for it. And it's not worth it. But, that's the ideal. Now, someone's been learning for many, many years. How is that the ideal? How is that now they come out, okay, I can provide for my family. I need to make money. Very good. But how is that the idea? I want to make money quick. But it's out there. It's in the world. It's an idea in the world. You won't tell me in the secular world. I get it. People want to make money quick and they don't want to work. There is no work ethic today in general. I think by everybody. Yeah. There's no work ethic. People want everything easy. And everything's been made so easy today. As we always say, we got a word processor, does all the syntax, does everything for you. You don't even need a word processor. Just put it in a chat GPT. Yeah. Tell what you want, tell the main things, and it'll write it itself. Probably much better than you could write it. Yeah. So all these gadgets, all these things, they make life easier. Yeah. Probably gonna take away jobs. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But what does it do though? Makes people stupid. Why does it make people stupid? They don't learn grammar properly. Yeah, they don't have to. They have to take it in school, but they really know. Deep down, when they have to write things or do things, they're not going to do it themselves. I mean, they may have to take exams, let's say on grammar, and other things. They may have to actually write things, on their own without any help. But when they get quote unquote to the real world, so who's not using this technology? Yeah, it's a lot easier. It sounds better the way you write, even if you're a good writer. It sounds better. Use better better adjectives, better synonyms, this, that, very good. So that helps in other ways. In many other ways, it helps. On the other hand, it makes the person stupider. That's what it does. Yeah. So, it doesn't help. It doesn't help in that sense. So, where's the work ethic? Where is all this? So as technology gets greater, we get stupider in different ways. We just plug it into a program, and the program does everything. But doesn't do we don't do it for ourselves, right? So I guess the point, the point is with everything else going on around us, it really shouldn't matter, and what other people have certainly shouldn't matter, right? But but at the same time, everything's going to be a test over here. Am I going to be happy with the little that I have? Is the person going to be haughty with all the good that they have? Yeah. Somebody asked, all right, I'll take questions here. Somebody asks, why be anti people of any place or time? They're all created by God. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is true. If everyone's created in the image of God, right, then how could you hate anyone? Yeah, what's the answer? Either you don't believe it, or you believe, or you believe, in something else, and that will override it. Now I gotta say, why would that override it? Why would that override it? Because they're not honest. You got, you got all these evangelicals. All these evangelicals, want to support Israel, want all the Jews to come to Israel. Yeah. But where's their heart? Their heart, as I would say. Where's their heart? First, they'll do whatever they can to convert Jews, right? That's one thing. 100%. They got plenty of money for that, unfortunately. Right? That's one thing. What's the other thing? What's the main thing over here? They want all the Jews to go to Israel so JC comes back. Because catch-22. They'll help support Israel and they'll funnel money, this, that, and the other thing. But really, it's very, I wouldn't say it's so deceptive. It's very clear what they want. They want all the Jews there for one reason. So JC can come back. But where is anyone who's intellectually honest? As I mentioned before, I met one person the last 30 years, 32 years. Intellectually honest. They're not intellectually honest. They have ulterior motives, right? Now, you ask, isn't everyone created in God's image? They'll admit it, yes. Yeah. Are the Jewish people chosen? Yes. Now, the Christians will say we're not chosen anymore. They'll give you Webster's 8th definition. Other groups will say we're not chosen, or this, or that, or whatever. So you'll say religion gets in the way. Yeah, because even though they'll say, God, what do you call, create everyone in its image. Keep in mind, the Gemara says God gave the Torah on one mountain, Mount Sinai. What's the word Sinai mean? The word Sinai comes from the word Sina. Sin Yud Nun Aleph or Sin Yud Nun, whatever the root is, or sorry, Shin Nun Aleph, whatever the root is. Okay. Now, that means hatred. That means when God created the world, when God gave the Torah to Jewish people, created hatred. Nations hate the Jewish people. Why they hate the Jewish people? Couldn't they have taken on Torah mitzvahs like the Jewish people? If they wanted the Torah, couldn't they have come to Mount Sinai? Yes. They chose not to. Gemara says, Vodazar 2b to 3a. The Medrash says the same thing. God goes to all the nations. They reject it. Okay. Now, if they reject the Torah, it's too late. Right? It's too late. If they want the Torah now, they have to come back. And they have to come back and convert. But when God gave the Jewish people the Torah, hatred went out amongst the world. You think God created this hatred? God wanted this hatred to be out there for whatever reason. Yeah? So you're right. God created one in his image. No one should ever hate anybody else. You're right. You're right. Why is a lot of hatred going to come to Jewish people? Jealous. Your Bible says you're chosen. Why should you be chosen? The religion will say we're not chosen. But you're right. Technically speaking, no one should. If we're created all in God's image, it shouldn't matter. But you see, it doesn't matter. You see, it doesn't matter. And there are whites out there who hate blacks. Why? Because they're black. Or they hate Asians. Or they hate others. So ask them. Aren't they creating God's image? You can ask them. Yeah. When you start asking people the question, tell me what they tell you. I think what they're going to tell you, in my opinion, for what it's worth, they're going to give one rat's tail. They're not going to care. They're going to say they do this, they do that, they do that. They make them racist. Okay. Make them racist. Yeah. It's a terrible thing. Even if what they say is true. Yeah, look at the crime, look at this, look at that. Okay, let's say it's true. And we understand the reasons for it. That's not the point. Even if we understand the reason for it, it doesn't change anything. That doesn't change anything. They still have a bias. Right? So you're going to say, but they're creating God's image. So what? That bias doesn't go away because of that. It doesn't go by the wayside at all. They still think what they think. And they'll say what they think, usually. Some people hide behind it, but, today I don't think, people say things, they don't care. Funny people say, people are too white, and white people done this, and white people done that, discrimination the other way, and what it's caused. Yeah, so you can also, you get Asians or blacks or others, they ain't white people. Okay. Now, they can be justified for what people have done. Let's say they're justified 100%. Now, ask them that question. Right, I'll give you homework. Ask them the question. So why do you, everyone's creating God's image. Why do you hate white people? Let's say you get a black person that hates white people. Yeah, why do you hate white people? They're creating God's image. They'll give you 10 reasons why. And they may all be legit. They 100% may 100% be legit. Yeah, let's say they are. They're not going to care. They're not going to care if they're born in God's image or not. They're not going to care one iota. They're going to say, but they did this, they did that, they did the other thing. Okay, but that doesn't change anything. In other words, the bias is going to be so strong regardless of what, obviously they have to come from a religious standpoint. If they're not coming from a religious standpoint, then you don't have a leg to stand on, right? In other words, you're talking apples and oranges. A Jew's going to say, yeah, should never intermarry. Why? Because you shouldn't intermarry. Why? Because you shouldn't intermarry. Oh, so you're a racist. You hate non-Jews. Oh, you also say you shouldn't intermarry. I said, right. Told someone this once. So they said, well, you hold that the marriage is forbidden. I said, right. It's right, marriage between Jews and non-Jews. I said, right. They said, why do you hold it forbidden? I said, because the Bible tells me that. The Torah tells me that. Right? And the Torah is written by God and passed down to Moses. Right? Then if you're going to tell me, if you're not going to believe in that, then you're a racist because you're saying Jews are better than non-Jews. They don't like that answer. But that's the answer. One answer. Right? It's one answer. So you have to find someone who's going to bias. against someone else. They have to be religious at some level, because if they're not religious, that answer is not gonna matter, right? You tell a secular Jew or a non-Jew, but everyone's created in God's image. So like, I don't believe in God. Yeah, or I'm agnostic. I'm not sure God exists. So they're gonna knock that out. So if they knock that out, what's the next question? Yeah, that question's not gonna be relevant, right? Yeah, I have somebody I can prove the Torah is true, and they're agnostic, quote unquote, but they don't care. Even if you tell me it's true, says I have to do it. And who says God, the Jewish people is what the Bible says is really true. So let's say, for argument's sake, there's truth to it. You prove it. I say, well, I don't have to keep it. Why not? Well, who says Judaism is right? Maybe the Buddhists are right. Maybe the Hindus are right. Maybe this one's right. Okay, you want to have that's a different discussion. Very good. But they're not going to care. They are not going to care. And what's the reason they're not going to care? Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. They want to do what they want to do. So I had a conversation with someone recently. It was a chat, wasn't really face to face, right? But I wanted the person to admit in this situation that the majority of the question is, I don't want to be inconvenienced. That's what I wanted to hear. See, I'd be much happier. I don't care what people say. I'd be much happier when people just admit the truth. And it's not about concern for someone else. Yeah, right? Example, person's got an aging parent. They got an aging parent. Okay. Now they're trying to convince the aging parents to go into, let's say, assisted living. Now, it makes sense. It makes sense because, it's a hospital right nearby and anything happens, they stay in the same place, right? Very good, right? That's, that makes sense. If the person, wants to do that, but the person doesn't want to do that. It's in their best interest, than rather live alone. It's going to be, and they get really sick. Okay, that's true, right? That is true. But what's the underlying theme? What's the underlying theme? The underlying theme is this person may be on their own. It's going to be hard for them to do it. It's a different state. It's going to take a lot more effort, and they're going to be inconvenienced. They're going to be inconvenienced. Now, they may say they have more family there, they have this, but it's not going to matter. Not so many people are going to see them anyway. But let's say, right, it's not going to help them get more depressed. They can't do things, right? There's no one really around to die of loneliness. Like, what's better? What's better? Yeah. So I wanted the person to admit, and they admitted it. I said, is it about that's the best thing? Or is it about the fact that you don't want to be inconvenienced? Yeah. So I said, well, it's partially both. Right? Half answer. Partially both. Now, what does that mean, partially both? Well, one answer, they think it is best for them. Right? It's just, a lot easier than, living on their own, it's going to be and whatever. Okay. But at the end of the day, they did admit, yeah. They did admit the burden of, a lot of the burden will fall on them. They don't want to deal with it. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Just admit it. Yeah. So you're going to say it doesn't change anything. You're right. It doesn't change anything. Right? I wanted to hear the person say themselves, I don't want to be inconvenienced. I had someone, give me Webster's definition about different things of religion and this and that. I said, just tell me you don't want to be inconvenienced. It's not about that because you don't believe in that. Just tell me you don't want to be inconvenienced. Back and forth. Finally, they admitted it. Okay. Said, you happy? I admitted it. I said, yeah. Just be honest. Two things I can't stand. Right? Kaufman's two pet peeves. One is people lie. That I can't stand. Right? And the second thing is people misrepresent. That's a similar thing. Right? But people misrepresent things that they think are true. That's basically a lie. Basically, it's, a similar thing. Right? But I'm much happier, if people would just admit, I don't want to be inconvenienced. Okay. But that's the name of the game. You're not necessarily looking out for the person's best interest. You don't want to deal with it. You 100% don't want it. I get it. And it's a big burden, right? It would be a big burden. It's not going to be so simple. Yeah. You know what that means? It means you can't travel when you want necessarily. You got to be around more. You got to be in a different state, this and that. Okay, well, not working. So that's not an issue. Not about work issue. But inconvenience. That's the, part of it, I would say. I do understand. I do understand. Part of it is all about the fact that it's probably healthier the other way. Definitely probably healthier, right? They're being taken care of. Anything happens, there's a hospital right there. Yeah, it's better in the long run. In the long run, that's the partial issue. But what came out more than that? You know, it's not half and half. Definitely not half and half. They definitely think it's the best thing for them. In the long run. Which okay. But what that's not it's not half and half. The other thing is I don't want to deal with it. I know it's gonna be a big mess. Okay. It's gonna be a big mess. I understand that. But that's what comes out more than wanting to help them. You know, person really care if they die of loneliness? No. Because this person can see them. That person, they won't. Some might. Some might. Yeah. But the vast majority, whoever these people are, they won't. So it's not about I'm looking out for their best interest. Part of it. I would say it's like a 30-70 split. Yeah. The 70% says, I want to deal with this. Yeah, okay. Be honest. That's all I ask from people. Be honest. Don't beat around the bush. Say it. Just admit it. Yeah, and it's not about looking out for someone's best interest. Part of it, very small part of it. Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's even 20-80 split. Yeah, but the 80% would say, you know what, it's gonna be such a mess. You have to be there, you have to do this, and all kinds of things. You're right. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard, no question. Yeah, but that's the point. That's the point. And the point is not looking around for the best interest. No, you're not. Partially, it's true. Partially, but who are you really looking out for? You're looking out for yourself. For it could take months, it could take this, and then but again, they don't want to be inconvenienced, and they want to go and travel and do whatever they want. Well, you don't have it both ways. You don't get it both ways. Don't be the easiest thing. What would be the easiest thing? The person dies, doesn't get complicated. Yeah, even if they get sick, okay, it's a short time, and they die, and that's it. It doesn't get so complicated. Great. But the way life works out, usually never. Yeah, usually never. I understand. I understand where the person's coming from. But think about it. If this is a parent, yeah, regardless, a great relationship, don't have a great relationship, you want them to be out of your hair, you don't want to have to deal with it. That's what it sounds like. Exactly what it sounds like. Again, do they have a point? I'm not saying they don't have a point. They have a point. They absolutely have a point. You know what? It's not the main point. It's not the main point. They admitted it, which is sad. Which is sad. Meaning, I'd rather let the whole thing just whatever happens, happens. I don't have to deal with it. I don't want to be inconvenienced. Okay. So I was happy they admitted it, but you have to admit it. So altruistic, want the best. No, you don't. Part of you does. A little bit. Part of you wants, you want the best. You want the best, for this person. Okay. Small part. But the vast majority doesn't. The vast majority says, I don't want to have to deal with this. Selfish. Extremely selfish. So and just admit it. Right? Just admit it. If that's what you think, good. Admit it. Don't say, oh, I gotta convince this person. Whatever. Yeah, of course. So your life is made much easier. I get it. But that's not looking out for the best interest. That's looking out for your interest. It's only looking for your interest and nobody else's. That's called capital S being selfish. Yeah. So I answer that question. Why hate groups of people for display of for those who control the direction. Soldier based out of fear. Yeah. Yeah. What do these hate groups want? What do they really want? They want to show superiority, right? That's what Yamach Shemo did. He wanted to show superiority. Gypsies, crippled people. I don't know if you can say crippled today. Whatever. Mentally challenged people, injured people, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. You want to, they're not productive in society, get rid of them. Get rid of them. So, but what's it based on? Don't blame them for this, blame them for that. But what did he have against everybody else in general? Pure creeds, the Aryan nation. Everyone else is subhuman. So there's other hate groups. What do they want? They want superiority. They want everyone to be, subjected to them. They want to be the ones in charge. They want to be the ones controlling things, whatever. Yeah, and they want people to drink that Kool-Aid, that these people are causing this, that, and the other thing. But that's what they want, right? How are you going to look good? By demolishing everyone else. Isn't that what Lashon Hara is all about? Person speaks Lashon Hara, God forbid, against someone else. What happens? What do they have in their hands? If you stole something from someone else, what do I have? I got the money in my hand, right? I got something. If you speak Lashon Hara, you speak badly against someone else, what do you have in your hand? Nothing. You know what you have? The only thing you have is that you made yourself look better by knocking someone else down. You don't have anything. That's why it's so severe. Because you don't have anything over here. You don't have anything tangible, let's say. Yeah. Because you made fun of them. Now, could be, maybe, other people are going to look at them differently. Maybe the livelihood will suffer. Maybe other things. Okay. But you don't have anything tangible in your hands. You're knocking that's what Lashon Hara is all about. You knock somebody down in order to make yourself look good. That's bad. Right? That's bad because you don't have anything in your hand. So then someone asked, shouldn't we try instead to pursue a better outcome? Yeah, the tearing the view of others. There's one way to do it. Right? I'll give you one free piece of advice. One way to do it, if you're a Jew or a JIT or a Jew wannabe, whatever it is, right? What is the best recipe? What is the best recipe? The best recipe is then if we do what we're supposed to do. The Jewish nation does what they're supposed to do, these things would happen. Now, anti-Semitism will never die, right, until the Messiah comes. Okay, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, but it's never going to die. Right? So there'll always be a reminder. Okay, but if we were impeccable, if the Jewish people did what they were supposed to do, I'm talking about Orthodox Jews. Yeah, if we would do what we were supposed to do, none of this would happen. Someone came to the Pirke Avos and said, miracle of the 6-day war. They're preparing 50,000 people to die. It's only, 2,000, it's a little bit less than 3,000, 2,800, something like that. It was praising, the miracle, the fact that not so many people were killed. So the Pirke Avos said nobody should have been killed. If we would have done what we're supposed to do, nobody would have died. Right? So if that's true, right? If that's true, then, you got to ask the question, okay, why is anti-Semitism at an all-time high? Because God is using non-Jews to get to us. Obviously, we're not doing something right. Or maybe we're doing a lot of things wrong. So God is using them. He's using like a pack of wolves to get to us. Putting the fear in us. Yeah, that's the way you stop it. The way you stop it is a Jew acting like a Jew should. In all aspects of life. That's not so easy. But if we do what we're supposed to do, this shouldn't happen. Even though anti-Semitism is always going to exist, doesn't matter, right? Sometimes better, sometimes it's worse. Okay, but in general, if we do what we're supposed to do, doesn't this get mitigated? Isn't it, on a much smaller scale? Sure. Doesn't mean it won't, it won't totally cease to exist. It's not going to cease to exist, right? It could be less, could be a lot less, but what's the reason for it going on? It's because God's using them as a stick to get to us. And it's a wake-up call for us. And it's mind-boggling, after everything that's happened, in the last 2 years, almost 2 years, and, the Jews are getting mitigated, Israel's getting mitigated all over the place, getting demolished all over the place. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. Genocide, total lie, right? Absolute lie. They'll say you have the right to defend yourself, but, whatever. Can't cause genocide. right? Genocide, absolute lie. Starvation, absolute lie. There are so many things. So many things, an absolute lie. Yeah. So it's bringing about the ire of the nations, against Jewish people. So obviously, the Jewish people are not doing something right over here. Maybe doing a lot of things wrong, right? Over here. Right. So he's saying, well, wouldn't it be a better outcome, than further tearing the view of others? Yeah, what the better outcome would be? That we do what we're supposed to do. I heard a great rabbi once say in a sermon before Yom Kippur. And he said people looking for all kinds of omens, try and change things. Yeah, trying to have a good outcome. Yeah. So he said, I got one that probably most people probably haven't thought of. You know what that's called? Repentance. They go to this rabbi's, kever is grave to pray, and this people do other things, and this, and that. He goes, I got a better thing. It's called repentance. You don't pass the buck. We have to take responsibility. We have to be better. Right? So yeah, things deteriorate. You know why they deteriorate? Because we don't do what we're supposed to do. And we're worse. So therefore God said, okay, I have to use a stick against you. I don't want to have to do that, but that's kind of the way it goes. Someone asked, the Europeans descendant of Esav. Yes. Europeans, anyone in the Western world. Right? Maybe we'll consider Australia also. Right? America, South America. Yeah. Europe, all part of Edom. All part of Esav. So you see beyond the shadow of a doubt, as the Malbim says, more than 100 years ago, this war of Gog and Magog is going to be Edom, the Western world, Esav against Islam. That's what you see right now. It's everywhere. You got Europe, all over the place fighting against them. You got America dealing with them. You get everywhere. Right? So that's Edom. Europe is also part of Edom. Someone asks, how can we best pray for drastic things to happen? When they wake up, and especially if they have Jewish blood, pray for them. That's what you can do. Yeah, you can pray for them and say, have them in mind, have their name in mind, and say, when you say the prayer in the Shmoneh Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, in the prayer of repentance, have them in mind. Anybody that needs to come back, whether Jews that don't know anything about Judaism, come back to Judaism, or even Christians to come the right way, or anybody else, they should come to the right, to the right path. That's the prayer. Right? That is the prayer. So Shmoneh Esrei and Tehillim. You say Tehillim for them. You say Psalms for them. Have them in mind. That they should change. Why is recorded history show us the mistakes so clearly? Then our societies to continue to do so. Oh, very good. I was a student of history, yeah. Got a degree in history. Okay. Able to say one is being obedient to clear sin. Are we supposed to stop one another from sin? All right, so let's answer the first question. First question is, why does history state so clearly? So who's the one who said it? Right? If you don't learn history, you're going to bound to repeat it. So if things are explicit, don't you think over generations, people should wake up and not make the same mistake? And if they don't learn history, what's going to happen? They will make the same mistakes. An Arab jailer, a jailer that had a terrorist, was an Arab terrorist. The Arab terrorist sees his Israeli jailer eating a sandwich on Passover, and he says, according to the Torah, it doesn't say it's forbidden. He said, yeah, but we're the new Israel, these laws don't apply anymore. So this Arab terrorist understood anyone doesn't have a connection to their land, to their history, that means we're going to get what we want over time. So we're going to keep fighting. Yeah. If you have no connection to your history, you give away the land for free. You see that. Omar would have done it. Barak would have done it. I mean, a lot of people would have given all this, a whole bunch of land for nothing. For nothing. And you see, every agreement any Arabs ever, signed, they've gone against it. Right? They've certainly gone against it. So one of the points to show how stupid we are, how stupid mankind is, that God makes it very clear throughout history that you know what's happened. You know what's happened in history. Now, if you don't learn from history, right, and it's so explicit, then you're a fool. And God is saying most of mankind, right? It's kind of stupid because you're bound to repeat that which was happened before, right? And you didn't do anything about it. You didn't learn from previous mistakes, right? So why you're not gonna have a claim. Person cannot make any claim because they can't say, well, we didn't know this happened, or we weren't aware of this. No. What's God gonna say? I made it happen. I made it clear. You just didn't look, you just didn't look into it. Right? So therefore you're bound to make the same mistakes. You're absolutely bound to make the same mistakes. So then a person will never have a claim. God's going to shut them up straight away and say, how do we make this mistake? How is it possible to make this mistake? God said, what do you mean? I give you precedent. I give you all kinds of things before that. You don't look into it. It's your own fault. Right? That is one thing. That's what I would answer for that. Next question is, are we supposed to stop another one from sin if possible? Definitely, if it's possible. If it's not possible, God can't hold it against you. Then we have an obligation to give rebuke. Yes, the Gemara says you give rebuke up to the point where someone's going to slap you. In some cases, not in all cases. Yeah, so then we have an obligation to give rebuke. In certain cases, yes. Some cases, no. But you can't say, well, they're not going to listen, so there's no point. No, not true. There are cases you give rebuke even if they won't listen. Yeah. That's what I'd say to that. Or just let them continue to do under some sort of allowance or another, trying to support same or worse atrocities. That was claimed to have been so bad, even without agreeing the abundance sin. I mean, how much this is a much bigger question. I'm not going to really deal with, but the question is, how far do you have to go? Do you stop somebody, from a smaller sin that could lead to a bigger sin, or you only stop them from a bigger sin, right? Well, that's the whole question. What you do, it's whatever. It's not so simple. I'll give one example. I'm not, going to go into detail on this, but I'll give one example. A single woman. She's not married. She's not married. Wants to use the mikvah to be with somebody. Should the mikvah allow her to go? You can say, well, if you don't, it'll be worse in some other ways. Yeah, it's a level of transgression over here. Yeah, if you don't, and none of these places do, she'll be over a worse transgression. If you do, it'll be less of a transgression. So what do you do? That's a question. In other words, are you gonna allow something to happen even though it's wrong, rather than something worse happen? So again, I'm not going into all the details, when it's forbidden, how it's forbidden, and all that. That's one case. That's just one case. Yeah, where someone does a transgression, and you could stop them from doing a greater transgression. Yeah, so do the ends justify the means? They're going to do it, right? You're not going to stop them from doing it. Yeah, if you don't allow this person to go to the mikvah, they're going to do it anyway, without that. So it's worse. So that's worse. So you say, well, you should accept them and let them come and go through all that. But why? You're helping someone sin. Yeah. Again, that's one. There are a lot of examples. There are a lot of examples I give. That's one. Right? That is one. But again, certain things have to be dealt with if it's causing problems in the community. That for sure. Right? It depends what it is. Sometimes you have to enact, decrees, what we call harashas, like a specific time. Right? Not that you should do it for all generations, but this specific time needed it. It depends, right? It depends on what it is, and it depends on the effect it's having. Someone asked, what approach should one take to such a severe state of the current history? Help others be able to help in such great amounts of tragedy, or something else? Distract, retract, lie. The only thing you can do is try and present information. Yeah. Propaganda never goes to waste. You know, see, you try and show people information, but you can't make them drink. Take a Christian, a hardbar, Bible thumping Christian, and say, I really want to help you. I think you're really going in the wrong path. Here, look at Rabbi Singer's website, and they refuse, or they look at it and they twist it. Got someone I'm dealing with, similar thing. No, I disagree, and I think he's wrong, and I think this, but they don't want to hear it. They just want to think their side is right. So what do? You do what you can, right? You show them information. They want to drink the Kool-Aid. Good. They don't want to drink the Kool-Aid. There's not much more you can do. There's not much more you can do. You do the best you can do. Someone asks, firstborn Hebrew class tomorrow. It's permissible during the 9 days. Yeah. Shouldn't be forbidden. It's God allows sin to continue. Yeah, what will it take for a man to realize he runs the world? Everyone makes mistakes, right? If you want, again, what's the old adage? The old adage is, Gemara says, if you want to go on the wrong path, in the right path, let's say, God will help you. If you want to go on the wrong path, He will not stop you. Right? He will not stop you. So the bottom line is, what's going to wake people up will be, if they want to be woken up. If they don't want to be woken up. If they don't want to be woken up, they'll never see it in 10 lifetimes. So it's their choice. God gave everyone free choice. Right? Until the Messiah comes, people still make mistakes. At that point, once the Messiah comes, after everything's said and done, there will be no evil inclination. So at that point, that's when it stops. That's when all the nonsense stops, and that's when all these people will die, unless they repent. And that's it. There's no time before. So you have individuals who will see the light. Some individuals will see the light. The vast majority will not see it. They won't see it. They think what they want. They do what they want. Okay, they're not going to see it. They're not interested. Right? So when is that ever going to stop? It's only going to stop when the Messiah comes and everyone has free choice. Then, you won't have free choice anymore. Then you have no evil inclination. That's the only time it stops. For some people, it can stop before that. Okay, it's not going to be everybody. Right? The person has to want to see the truth. And sometimes the person's going to get sledgehammered. And they're only going to see the truth when, their absolute life depends on it, so to speak. Otherwise, they won't see it. And sometimes even then, they won't see it. Yeah, so that won't change. That'll never change. That'll never change until the Messiah comes. They'll see tragedy after tragedy. God, man's inhumanity to man. Why doesn't God do anything? This, that. They don't want to believe. They want to only believe in whatever they want to believe in. Okay, it's their choice. When's it going to end? When the Messiah comes. They may not be in the world. They may not survive it. So they don't survive it, they don't survive. But that's what's going to change. Then everybody, whoever survives, will be doing God's will. Why would they be doing God's will? Because they don't have an evil inclination. It's the only reason. That's what it's going to be. Right? That's what it's going to be when they're going to recognize it when the Messiah comes. Yeah, let me see other questions here. Whoops. Yeah, any other questions? Is there a calendar reference for identifying these days? I wouldn't say a calendar, but I would say there are 15 signs. Gemara and Sota talks about 15 signs that we're living in the Messianic era. So, you can't look at it as, what Hebrew year we're living in. What Hebrew year we're living in. We got 200 some odd years before the Messiah comes, so you can scale it towards that. But Messiah can come anytime. He has to come before the year 6000. Right? So we got 200 some odd years for that to happen. So we don't have that much time. So yeah, you start preparing now. Because we are living in the Messianic era. Start, 100%. Start preparing now. Will people still get married and have kids after Mashiach comes? I don't think so. According to the Rambam, maybe. But I don't think so. The reason is, it's because the Gemara says all the souls have to come out of heaven before the Messiah can come. So if that's the case, then it doesn't sound like people will be having kids. According to the Rambam, this world's not going to be any different than then then Olam Haba, so to speak, it'll be similar. So according to the Rambam, it would seem not that way. Maybe we'll have kids after that. Yeah, but I would think not that way because the Gemara says that all the souls have to come out. If all the souls have to come out, you're not having any, no one's having kids. No one should be having kids because you don't need any of those souls anymore. All those souls have already come out, so you wouldn't need them. So I would think not that way. Yeah, let me see if there are other questions. Asking about the Messiah, asking about the 9 days. The 9 days already started. 9 days started now. 9 days started from the first of the month of Av, which was started Friday night. So you don't need any signs. That's the new month started. So that started the 9 days. Is there a point in the calendar for annual holidays? Yeah. Yeah. There's you can go online, Hebrew calendar, do a search for Hebrew calendar and ask what all the holidays are. That you should be able to find. It's not that hard to find. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Saturday, 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Israel time. There will be no class next week because it will be the fast the 9th of Av. So I get a week off. Otherwise, anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Coffin, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I get videos and Q&As, ethics of our fathers, book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimcoffin@gmail.com, RBBIChaimCoffman@gmail.com, whichever good.